Hey folks, today I have a bit of a different kind of video for you. With all this summer harvest coming in, I have a ton of work to do in the kitchen, and I don't really mind because it is so debilitatingly hot outside. So it is very nice to be inside with the AC, even if I am stuck in the kitchen for hours a day, every day, preserving all of this awesome food that I've grown. So this is going to take place over the course of several different days, and it was just easier for me to do a voiceover because I can get way more things done when I'm not having to stop and change camera angles and talk to a camera. So I've got a couple of things in this video today, different things that I do to preserve different kinds of fruits that come in. And right now I am coring and scoring tomatoes, which will then be placed into these gallon-sized freezer bags. And they'll just freeze until I am ready to make sauce out of them. One of the greatest ways to preserve tomatoes to make sauce is this way, because once you take the core out and you score the bottom, and then you freeze them, when they come out of the freezer when you're ready to make the sauce, the peels just come right off. So it's a super easy way to put away your tomatoes and then also make it easier for you to make sauce afterwards. And then they're out of the way, because it's when you're getting tons and tons of tomatoes in at once, it's really nice to have a way to store them, put them out of the way, and just not have to deal with them right at that moment. A lot of these tomatoes, some of them may have blossom end rot or small little blemishes. You do want to cut those out and just get rid of as many blemishes as possible. Obviously, if the bottom is too rotted out, it probably won't be usable for a paste tomato or any sort of sauce. And those I'll just use for fresh eating. But most of these are the Estiva tomato, the hybrid that I grew this year. They're not specifically paste tomatoes. If you recall from my garden tours, my Amish paste, the one paste tomato I had died. But they'll do in a pinch. They'll just be a lot more juicy than a normal paste tomato. They'll have less meat, so you'll have to boil it down a bit longer. But otherwise, they are very nice, uniform tomatoes, and I'm very pleased with this variety this year. But the star of the show in production this summer has been the Armenian cucumber. And I honestly, I honestly cannot use them fast enough. I try my best to make pickles, which is quick pickles, which is what I'm doing here. I have never canned any pickles because honestly, if we make quick pickles, they're gone immediately. So there's no use in preserving them long term because they'll be eaten pretty quickly. But the Armenian cucumber, when you harvest it at its small size, will be almost exactly like a cucumber in taste, texture, in every way possible, except that it has ridges and it's not smooth on the outside, so it doesn't really look like a cucumber. And then when they get very, very large, they're technically a melon, and they can get a little bitter in the heat. And then if you want to make cucumbers out of the very large melons, I mean, you have to just cut them into smaller pieces. But when they're small, like a cucumber, I just cut them into spears, fill a jar, and I'm not going to do a quick pickle recipe for you guys. I'm still trying to perfect mine. But essentially, you want to, whatever the volume of your jar is, you want to do a base of half white vinegar, distilled white vinegar at 5%, and then half water. And you boil that mixture, and just a quick boil, get it to a boiling temp, and then let it cool. And put whatever spices you would like in your jars. For me, I'd use coriander seed, mustard seed, black pepper, salt, and dill. So I have both dill flour and dill seed. I think I used seed in this one. Oh, you know what? I may have had some leaves too. But you add all your spices and your pickles to the jar and then pour that brine over it and set it in the fridge and let it soak for about 24 hours. And while I was making these pickles, I had some chicken bones that I was cooking in the slow cooker to make bone broth with. I do this pretty often whenever we spatchcock a chicken. And I'll just put the leftover bones in a freezer bag until I have about a gallon size full. And then I'll throw it in the slow cooker with water, vinegar, because the vinegar will draw out the collagen from the bones, and maybe some spices, some peppers for added spice. You know how I love my spicy food. And then once it's done, I put it in these cute little freezer trays my mom gave me. They just freeze the bone broth into blocks of ice, and I love it. So here I am cutting up one of the tromboncino squashes that did not. Actually, this may be a Tahitian melon. I think it's a Tahitian melon. But I had several squashes that did not ripen to maturity before I was able to harvest them because the squash bugs just killed everything. So I couldn't store them long term, but they also weren't soft, so I couldn't eat them like a zucchini. So what I did, and this is my second time doing it, I don't really have a recipe down for you guys, but what I ended up doing was making squash soup out of them, and it was delicious. Technically roasted squash soup. So here I'm just cutting them up and getting all the insides out, all the seeds. Those are going to go to the chickens. And then I'm going to place them on a roasting pan with some other vegetables to roast them for about 30 minutes at 400 degrees. And once all those vegetables are roasted together, you just blend it up and make a delicious squash soup out of them. This is my second time, but my first time trying it, I was just flying by the seat of my pants, making things up as I go. I don't really like to follow recipes. I'm terrible at it. I only have a few recipe books and they just sit useless in my drawer. But this turned out really great, and I'm super happy that I found a way to use all of this squash that unfortunately I couldn't store over the winter like I'd wanted to, but still didn't go to waste because I was able to use it in another way. Now, this is some homegrown garlic. Everything basically that I'm making here today is using my harvest ingredients, including the chicken. That chicken broth came from one of the chickens that we had harvested here on the farm. But this is my homegrown garlic, and I'm just putting about two or three cloves in this soup. I don't want it too garlicky. I don't like sweet soups, and this squash isn't that sweet, but I also don't like super garlicky soups. But I put garlic in everything. So, of course, some is going in. I also ended up putting some onion that I harvested from the spring in here, and of course, hot peppers because everything needs a little bit of spice. And I just threw those in there to roast at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. Once they're nice and done and soft, I obviously wait till they cool so I can handle them. And you're just going to scrape the inside out. They were too hard. They were like halfway mature, so they're too hard to eat the rind, and the rind was blemished anyways. So I'm just pulling everything out kind of like a butternut squash and putting it all in the bowl, including all of the roasted vegetables together. And I like a creamy base soup, so I'm using coconut milk here. I just used a whole can for these two squashes that I used. You can use anything, or you can just use water. The squash was a little grainy the first time I did it, so you do want to be sure to blend it very, very well. And then I add the coconut milk because obviously it imparts a creamier base, and I don't eat dairy. I'm lactose intolerant, but this doesn't sweeten it too much. You could use something else like almond milk or something a little less sweet than coconut milk. This is what I had on hand, and it's perfect. I love it. Then you just blend everything together, nice and pureed. You could also, I mean, I wouldn't suggest using an immersion blender from the get-go because this was just a large amount of squash. But you could always finish it off with an immersion blender to make sure you got it super creamy. I just blended it forever. I made sure everything was super, super cut up, and I really didn't want it grainy again this time. You can add the spices in whenever. I just forgot when I started blending it. So I stopped halfway through and added in some salt and pepper, some turmeric and paprika, and then finished off blending, and basically that's it. It's done. I just poured them into some Tupperware containers, these Pyrex glass containers I have, and they were eaten within 2 days. Those are a bit large. I don't know the sizes on those containers, but there were about 4 servings of soup for those 2 Tahitian melons and a few cloves of garlic, about half an onion, and a few peppers. It's a pretty good meal. That would be enough for us and the kids, definitely. And here on another day, I needed more lotion. And I do have a video about this, which I'll link down below, about making tallow balm. But here is a bunch of kidney fat, or called suet. It's beef kidney fat. And I am just cooking it in the slow cooker. That's the most hands-off way I've found to make tallow. Once it's done, it takes, I don't know, about 6-8 hours. You want all that fat completely rendered. You're going to be left with these little crispy bits. And they're good to feed to the dogs. I don't like them to eat personally. If you let them dry out a bit, they can be good on a salad or something. But I just give these to the dogs as a treat. And you want to strain everything out. Here I'm just getting all the crispy bits out and as much tallow, like liquid tallow, squeezed from them as I can. You could be more thorough with this by using a cheesecloth and really straining it out, but I didn't mind. And then you're going to do a double strain here with the cheesecloth at the end, just to make sure. I mean, I don't want any pieces of fat stuck in my lotion. And you'll need extra hands for this, because if you don't, then that cheesecloth is just going to fall right into the jar. So Chase helped me out here, and I had almost a full quart-size jar of tallow once it was all said and done, which is a bit more than I need for lotion. But I'm going to actually take away about half of it, and just at this point, this finished product is the exact tallow that I use in my kitchen as my cooking fat. So I just pour off what's left into my jar in the kitchen, and I want about half of that quart, because I'm going to do a 50-50 blend of tallow and a liquid oil, which you're going to need if you want any sort of pliability in your lotion. So here I had some leftover sunflower and sesame oil. Both oils I keep in the fridge, and I use them specifically for skincare purposes. It ended up being the perfect amount from the leftovers that I had in both jars. So it was about like 60% tallow and 40% liquid oil. And that just makes it easier, more spreadable on your skin, because 100% pure tallow at room temperature is extremely hard, and it would just be absolutely impossible to use as a lotion if you didn't do around 50% liquid oil. Now, you can't use coconut oil for this, because coconut oil is solid at room temperature as well. It does have to be liquid. And then, of course, tallow doesn't have a terrible smell, but I do like adding essential oils. And here I'm using peppermint, lavender, and jasmine essential oils. Less on the peppermint side, more on the jasmine. And I am not an aromatherapist or licensed or anything, so do your own research when using essential oils. I think I did about 30 drops each of jasmine and lavender, and then less of the peppermint. But you do want to do your research, because essential oils in large amounts can be toxic, especially with the types of oils you use. All 3 of these are relatively harmless, but I just put in enough so that it smells pleasant. I don't want to actually feel the peppermint or anything on my body when I use the lotion. On this same day, I also decided to try my hand at honey fermented garlic, which I have never done before. I've watched several videos, read several articles on it. And since I have a ton of garlic from what I harvested this spring, that I'm assuming I won't get through this year. There's like so much garlic that I harvested. I decided, why not? Let's peel some garlic cloves and try this honey fermented garlic. Now, the most annoying part of this process is actually peeling all of the garlic, because you do not want to smash the cloves. You want them relatively intact. So I went through and peeled every clove of garlic by hand with my fingers and nails. And a lot of these cloves were pretty small. It was just a very, very long and slightly annoying process. And I ended up doing less than I had originally set out to because it took so long to peel these. I think it was about 30 minutes. And it ended up just doing one of those small, like jelly jars full. That's about when I gave up. And here I'm cutting off like the blemishes. You know, sometimes garlic can get those bruises, and I'm cutting off those ends, the blossom ends of the garlic pieces as well. I just want to make sure that there are no unnecessary germs or blemishes going in this ferment, just to make it as safe as possible. And then after this, we are going to put our garlic in the jar and just put honey over it. It's a very, very simple process. You do want to use raw honey if you can get it. This is local raw honey. We have a lot of beekeepers in the area, and you can buy this at our farmer's market. This is a relatively new jar I got because the last jar I had ended up crystallizing, which is a natural process. It's fine. But I just pour it over, and you want to move the honey around, move the garlic around so that all parts of the garlic is covered in honey. So I just took a plastic fork, move it around a bit, and top it off with a little honey on top. You want to make sure all of your pieces are covered, and then screw your lid on. Though this is a ferment, so you don't want to screw it on too tight because air will need to escape. But you have your finished product. Put it inside a dark place and make sure every morning you move it around a bit so that all the garlic stays covered. But other than that, you're done. And thank you guys for coming along with me today. It has been a busy harvest season and a busy preserving season so far, but I will be back in the garden with you guys on the next video.